Good morning, everybody. Brian Neubert here again from goldenblack.com. It is Friday, May 22nd. Where has the time gone? This is your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for today, Friday, your last one of the week. I'm sure you'll miss me during the weekend. I'm sure you'll get through it. This is brought to you by Fox Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remax Ability Plus. I want to remind you once again that if you're looking for a hell of a dinner or to support our local restaurants, please keep in mind the 6th Street Dive in Lafayette, which is reopening for in-house seating, I believe, in some manner. East End Grill in Lafayette, Arnie's, Bruno's, Whitaker Inn, and Triple X. All of them have been good to us. We would appreciate it if you would be good to them. You have all weekend to do it. No excuses. Great food. Please keep them in mind. We've been looking for topics for this thing, and we've been taking suggestions from people for them. Got one this week from Larry. I wanted to talk about quarterback play at Purdue, specifically where Purdue is in recruiting in terms of its ability to attract really, really high-end sorts of quarterback recruits, as it would stand to reason to suggest Purdue would be able to. Because it's been able to do that at wide receiver. It's been able to do that at other offensive skill positions because the Brahms have such a reputation with quarterbacks, because this is going to be a quarterback-driven program, I think, as long as they're here. Something to make note of is the fact that incoming signee Mike Alemo is a four-star recruit by most measures. I don't know if he necessarily had the national offers that people tend to equate with being a big-time quarterback. But he's an interesting case because St. Joseph's Regional out in North Jersey is one of my high school's rivals. I've been keenly aware of them for a long, long time. Under a different set of circumstances, had Michael Alemo come up 20 years ago on the other side of Paramus, New Jersey, he probably would have been in one of my mother's classes. Obviously, I know the area relatively well. I follow St. Joseph's Regional from a distance, obviously not all that closely, but I'm aware of them, and I know that they don't throw the ball very much. So this is one of those situations where you're ranking a guy, you're evaluating a guy off of what you see in him in the limited opportunities he gets, but also camps and whatever else he might have done, prior to his senior year at St. Joe's. Great program he comes from, not exactly a place that lives and dies with its quarterback play. But he is a physical talent. He is a guy who qualifies by most measures as a big-time quarterback recruit. Outside of that, obviously, Purdue's, I don't think it's any secret who Purdue wants in 2021. Donovan McCulley from Lawrence North, a different sort of quarterback, more of a dual threat guy, a national type of recruit, a really high-end guy. Again, not a guy with the national offers per se. This is an uncommon offseason, so that might be part of the reason there. But I know Purdue wants to go in a little bit of a different direction quarterback-wise. They want to get a little bit more of a dual threat element in there. I think that's sort of the way that college football is going. I think it's more and more important nowadays that your quarterback be able to be a running threat, be able to make improvisational plays when it is dictated, but also be part of the design running game. I think part of that is simply to give defenses a lot more to worry about, but also I think there's something to be said for the fact that when the ball doesn't leave the quarterback's hand, the ball is less likely to be turned over. And I think limiting turnovers nowadays in football is more important than probably ever. For whatever reason, I don't necessarily know if I can articulate that, but it just feels like, especially for some of these higher-powered offensive teams, they're going to score. They just can't score when they turn the ball over. So I think it's really important for Purdue to be able to get that element, in its opinion, anyway. Quarterback play at Purdue obviously is going to be pivotal. I think programs ideally mirror whatever their coach happens to be. You look at Iowa, Kirk Ferentz being an NFL offensive line guy. Clearly, offensive line is a big part of Iowa's success. You look at Michigan State under Mark D'Antonio, Nick Saban style of defense, that was always kind of their thing. I think at Purdue, this is going to be a quarterback and offensive-driven program as long as the Brahms are here. I can't imagine there being a program in college football that works more on throwing the ball down the field in practice than Purdue does. I know some of the air raid people out west, out in the Big 12 and whatnot, and all over the country really, really put a high emphasis on it. But Purdue spends a lot of time working on throwing the ball vertically. That's going to be kind of their thing, I think, moving forward. That puts an extreme emphasis, obviously, on quarterback play. Jeff Brom hasn't really had a star quarterback yet at Purdue. Obviously, I don't think he's had the opportunity to. I think that he's not really had a chance to develop a quarterback necessarily at Purdue. I'm not sure he's taken a quarterback from freshman to being a starter either at Western Kentucky or Purdue. That is solely a function of the fact that he's not had a chance to. Because he wasn't at Western Kentucky long enough to bring anybody up to the program. He's not yet been at Purdue long enough for him to have brought up anybody through the program. Jack Plummer would really be the first candidate for that. His first quarterback signee really was Nick Sipe, who wasn't even his recruit, who obviously has been lost now to injury. So it'll be interesting to see how Purdue's program progresses from a quarterback development perspective once they start getting a higher level of quarterback in the door. They have gotten good quarterbacks. Jack Plummer, again, was the guy Purdue wanted. Michigan offered him late in the process. He was a very highly thought of guy, if not the most decorated guy. Michael Alamo, obviously, we've talked about. If Purdue can get Donovan McCulley, that would kind of be their signature guy probably to this point from an accolades and rankings perspective, but Purdue's gotten some good quarterbacks already. It'll be interesting to see where Purdue goes now from a developmental standpoint, whether or not, Jeff Brom's reputation with quarterbacks translates to being a great developer of them from young player to experienced player over time. Again, the body of work just isn't there yet because the runway to this point hasn't been extensive enough. If it gets to the point, I've always said this, if it gets to the point where, perhaps you aren't getting necessarily the quarterbacks in the program you'd ideally like, perhaps you get a situation where, the guys who've been in the program aren't quite what you feel like you need. I feel like, Purdue could be a real draw on the graduate transfer wire even. Let Jeff Brom take the experienced guy, work with him if the situation dictates. This was one of those years. Purdue got Austin Burton, obviously. I think Purdue just makes a lot of sense for the guy looking for the big opportunity later in his career. And I think it makes a lot of sense for programs like Purdue. Let somebody else take the young kid, work through all the inconsistency right away, work with the kid, and then swoop in at the last second, get the best out of the kid. I think Jeff Brom, too, probably would be a little bit more compatible with an older guy than he might be a young kid, given the propensity for making mistakes young kids might have. I just think if Purdue gets in situations, again, moving forward, where they don't quite have what they feel like they need at quarterback, the graduate transfer wire does make a lot of sense. And that is a big part of college football nowadays. You look at, I've said this before on this video, you look at all around the country the last couple of years, the Justin Fields, Joe Burrow, obviously won a Heisman, Jalen Hurts. There's just been guys all over the place, high-level quarterbacks jumping from one elite program to another elite quarterback and winning big. And one would think that if Purdue wants a seat at that table on a kid like that, every now and then you might be able to get that guy because you do have an infrastructure in place here where you do play football at a really high level. You do play great competition. You do have not just a quarterback, but quarterbacks on your coaching staff who know what it takes to play in the NFL, who run an NFL style of offense, who can surround you, have shown they can surround you with really high-end weapons. It just makes a lot of sense for that quarterback who maybe things didn't work out at an LSU or a Georgia or a Clemson or an Ohio State or an Oklahoma. This place would make a lot of sense for that player. I don't necessarily think that, Purdue's long-term plan is, hey, we'll just go get a transfer quarterback every couple of years. But I'm saying if the situation arises, it is something that would make a lot of sense. But I do think that obviously quarterback play one way or another, whether it's through the high school ranks and development thereafter, or it's some other non-traditional method. I think Purdue obviously is a program that is probably, its results are going to be largely dictated by its quarterback play, because this is a program that is going to be highly dependent on its quarterback. When you look at Purdue's success under Jeff Brom thus far, I haven't gone back and crunched these numbers, but I would imagine success correlates closely with one's ability to make big plays in the passing game specifically. The games where Purdue's been able to make big plays in the passing game are probably the games Purdue had more success. The games they weren't able to make big plays in the passing game probably were the games they were least likely to have had success in. Purdue would love to be able to be balanced and run the football, well enough to be able to win games that way, or at least control games that way. Whether or not that's necessarily reality in the Big Ten right away anyway, I don't remember the last time that was reality for Purdue, and I've been covering them for 20 years. It's not a place where it's easy to build an Ohio State, Michigan State style of front seven, running game infrastructure, etc. Purdue, I think from a running game perspective, is always going to have to be that team that succeeds in the passing game and sets up the run that way by keeping people off balance. You look at Jeff Brom's first year at Purdue, the number of big plays they made in the running game was pretty significant, but it was also a function of the fact that that offense had people on their hands and knees basically having no idea what was coming next. And Purdue got in a nice little rhythm passing the ball, and that set up the run. People don't talk about that enough, about the running game. You only talk about the offensive line. You only talk about the blocking. You only talk about the running backs doing the right thing. The biggest part of it to me is your ability to keep people off balance, to be able to zig when you're supposed to zag, to get people off balance with the passing game and then run off of that. I think that's what really worked for Purdue in 2017, and I think that's probably a big part of what has to work for Purdue moving forward, and that obviously depends on the passing game, which obviously depends on the quarterback. So, obviously I'm finding a lot of different creative ways here to say that, hey, it is important to be able to pass the football in college football in the year 2021. So that much you don't need me to tell you. I'm just saying it's especially important at Purdue because this is a quarterback school with a quarterback history, and when your current self can jibe with your history, I think that's something fans respond to. I think that's something you can sell in recruiting. I think you can go to people and say in recruiting to a really high-end quarterback recruit, hey, this is where Bob Greasy went. This is where Drew Brees went. This is where Kyle Orton went. This is where Mike Phipps went. Mark Herman's. A lot of these kids don't know who a lot of those names are. They know who Drew Brees is, obviously. But it's always a valuable message to a kid in recruiting to say, we've had great players before. We feel like you're right in line with those guys. You can come here and take your place, so to speak. So Purdue's quarterback history is a big part of its importance, too, to this program. So quarterback play is very important at Purdue. And I think Purdue is getting a level of player that probably jives with what it needs based on rankings and whatnot. I think Donovan McCulley, I've said from day one, and I will stand by this, that the most important player Purdue is recruiting in 2021 is Yanni Karlaftis. And I'm saying that because because the linebacker is a player that Purdue has all sorts of connections to, all sorts of advantages with. He's a great high school prospect who happens to be at a position where early opportunity is there in spades for Purdue. Linebacker is a huge need in this class. But I'm starting to walk it back a little bit because I'm thinking Donovan McCulley, this could be a 1A, 1B situation, and I'm not entirely sure which one's 1A and 1B. I think Donovan McCulley is the sort of prospect that, Purdue would like to get in terms of a prestige perspective at quarterback, but also he's perfect, I think, having seen him live for what they're trying to move toward in terms of their ability to have a guy who can be a running threat, who can be more of that traditional dual threat sort of guy. So a lot of what I'm talking about here is really relevant moving forward over the next few months and potentially weeks, as Donovan McCulley moves toward a decision here when he's going to decide. I have no idea, but he's a very important recruit for Purdue in this cycle and one to watch closely. So that's what I've got on quarterback play. I hope that made sense. Again, just turning on the recorder and talking here. Very, very little preparation. So I hope this all did make sense. This has been your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for Friday. Let me check the date again. May 22nd. So this will be your last one for the week. I'm sure you will miss me over the weekend. We will talk to you again on Monday. as we probably start moving toward winding this daily feature down. Um, this has been brought to you by Fox Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remax Ability Plus. Want to remind you once again to please keep in mind our restaurant friends at 6th Street Dive, which is reopening for seating here, I believe. East End Grill, Arnie's, Bruno's, the Whitaker Inn, and Triple X. So if you could please keep them in mind this weekend if you're looking for a hell of a dinner, we would appreciate it. I'm only now noticing my lime green level is back there in the background. That's probably pretty distracting. I don't think there's any more amazing invention than the level. It absolutely blows my mind, and I've been using it to hang things on the wall, as you can probably see behind me. I didn't notice it was there. Normally, I do a little check on the background to make sure nothing silly is back there. I have a lot of silly things, but I didn't notice the level. So if that was distracting, I apologize. Have a good weekend, everybody.